Hello and welcome to Colred Plays Raid Shadow Legends. I am Colred. Thank you for joining me. Let's talk about pulling shards. Yeah, I want to talk about pulling shards because one of the most common questions I get from viewers, especially new players, is when should I pull my shards? Should I be saving up for a fusion? Should I be waiting for a guaranteed champion event? Should I be pulling during a 1+1 or waiting for a 2x event? And the problem is, or the difficulty with that question is, there's no one size fits all answer to that question. Every player is different. Every account's different. Some of us are free to play players. Some of us are low spenders. Some of us are whales and krakens. Some of us spend a lot of time in game grinding. Others only play the game casually. So there are a lot of things that go into figuring out what would make the optimal scenario for your account. And as a result, I can't really answer for you when the best time to pull shards is. Now, what I can do is talk about some concepts around shard pulling, how to optimize, get more value for your shards. And also, I can walk you through some decision-making processes that I use here on my account. This is my main account, and I've been playing almost 3 years on this account. And there have been different phases of this account where I've made different decisions around shards. So I'm going to talk you through some of those today, and hopefully that'll give you some insight and maybe help you design a strategy, a method, an approach for pulling shards that works for you. And ultimately, maybe that's the best answer I can provide. I hope you're ready for it. Let's get started. Just a quick reminder to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and consider joining our Discord community. Also, don't forget about our live stream every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. We call it Takeover Tuesday. That's why I give away free account takeovers to members of my Discord community. So if you're into takeover content or you want to try for a free takeover of your own, don't forget to join us Tuesday at 1 p.m. Hope to see you there. Now let's get back to the video. All right, now the first thing we need to talk about when we're talking about pulling shards is that pulling shards is fun. We need to acknowledge that, right? That's why there's an impulse to YOLO a shard as soon as you get it, right? You get a void shard or a primal or a sacred, and there is this pressure to just pull it right now because it has the potential to turn into something beautiful and amazing for your account. Of course, when it doesn't, that hurts, but we just move on and we go on and try to get more shards. So I'm going to tell you this right now. You should do whatever brings you joy, whatever makes your gaming fun for you, whatever improves your experience in raid from an emotional standpoint, from a mental standpoint. You should do that. You should absolutely do that. So don't let anybody tell you not to game the way you want to game. But if you want to have a discussion about when it is optimal to pull a shard, YOLOing a shard is never optimal. And it doesn't matter what the result is, right? 1 out of every 200 void shards, if you just YOLO a void shard, 1 out of every 200 void shards will result in a void legendary. That means some of you out there have YOLO shards and hit amazing champions. That doesn't mean it was the optimal time to pull. It just means you got lucky. And that's fine. Luck is part of the game. But if I talk about my account for a second, my main account is almost 3 years old. It'll be 3 years old next month. And I pulled roughly 800 void shards on this account. Now, I've done that mostly during 2x events. Maybe less than 50 void shards have been pulled outside of 2x events. So if I think about this, consider 800 shards pulled only during 2x events versus 800 shards pulled only during 1x event, right? That's going to be a return of 8 void legendaries versus 4 void legendaries. Now, granted, that's over a 3-year time period, but that's 4 more chances at a Yumiko, or a Krisk, or a Terrace, or Marishka, or a Siphi. So these are champions that we all want. These are the champions we go after. I've got a Cardiel on my account, and you might say, well, hey, you got lucky that you pulled Cardiel, but I maximized my chances to get good void legendaries by pulling primarily during 2x events. And yes, I got lucky that during one of those 2x events, I pulled Cardiel. But my point is, if you are thinking about playing this game long term, you do want to save up and use those 2x events as probably the foundation for your shard pulls, especially early in the game. Now, you may have heard that The guaranteed champion events are better. And there's a debate to be had. There's definitely a debate to be had there. I could say that the return on investment is a little bit higher for the guaranteed champions. For instance, you can get a guaranteed void legendary usually for around 150 shards. So imagine you're pulling 150 void shards during a normal event. You have a 0.5% chance of getting a legendary. So your expected return on 150 void shards is 0.75 legendaries. Plus, you're going to get the guaranteed legendary. So that's 1.75 legendaries. That's your expected return on 150 shards. I know you can't get fractional champions, but this is about, the overall player base and what we're going to be getting based on our shards. So each player would average 1.75 legendaries. Now, if you pulled those 150 shards during a 2x event, you would be expecting 1.5 legendary champions to come back. So on average, each player would get a quarter more of a legendary by saving for the guaranteed champions. However, this is not as valuable early in the game, because remember that your epic chances also double during a 2x event. So you go from an 8% chance to a 16% chance to pull an epic. And epics are incredibly valuable, especially if you're a free-to-play player or a low spender, or if you're just early in the game. Pulling that Demitha, that Man-Eater, that Seer, even just pulling during 2x Void Shard events and getting, some of those not God tier Void epics can be really helpful in places like faction crypts, or sometimes in Doom Tower secret rooms, or sometimes in some kind of niche capacity as a boss solution that you might use. But think also about those really big ones like Godseeker Aniri or Inquisitor Shamail, these champions that we all want. So for the first year or so, maybe a little bit longer depending on how much you're spending or if you're a free-to-play player, I would say only pull during 2x Void Shard events. You will get to a point where you may decide that you're going to start saving for guaranteed champion. Now, there's a second downside to the guaranteed champion thing, which is that you don't know when they're coming and you don't know which champion is going to be guaranteed. And so as a result, it's a little bit less rewarding than you might think it is when you save up for 6 months only to get a shot at a Void Legendary who's really not that interesting to your account, isn't going to help you, or maybe is already a Void Legendary you've got, right? And now you've spent 6 months not pulling shards when potentially all along the way you could have been getting epics or maybe even legendaries who could have given you 6 months or 3 months or 1 month of investment before you get to the point where you actually go for that guaranteed champion. So I basically avoid the guaranteed champions. I don't care about them that much, especially when it comes to void shards. So as a free-to-play player, I don't get that many void shards. But I am at the point where I can save for the ancient guaranteed if I like. If I want, I can do that. Okay, so that is the 2x event. Now, what happens when you are 3 years in? Well, there's a bunch of different things that you can do here. I like to focus on fusion champions. I get fusion champions, and there are a bunch of reasons why. One reason why is because I know the champion that I'm getting, and I can always get the fusion champion based on my shards. Right? At this point in the game, I clear enough clan bosses. I clear Doom Tower, both difficulty levels. I clear Centranos, both difficulty levels. So there is a point where you get plenty of shards, and now you have the option to go for every single fusion. So what I like to do is I like to think about the fusions as a guaranteed champion event. Right? If I spend my shards during the fusion, even if I miss on all of my shards, I will have the fusion legendary as a final reward. So it's kind of like a guaranteed champion. Now, in this particular case today, we've got an event going on, which is there is a summon rush. And this summon rush is necessary for the Vault Guardian Wixwell fusion event. So this is something that's going to happen in the future. You'll have every fusion event, you usually have a champion chase and a summon rush. Right? Champion chase can be completed at least partially without shards, but the summon rush is only a shard event, and the current format is such that you cannot skip this event. You just basically can't unless you get really, really lucky. Like in this particular one, it's a classic fusion. So if you happen to like pull a few void shards and you got a copy of Terex the Restless, or you were pulling shards during the champion chase and you got an Arwid Quivergrass, then you wouldn't have to do this summon rush. But that's really rare, and most players won't have that option. So right now, I know that it's 500 points for a Sacred Shard. So I'm going to need at least 5 Sacred Shards to go after Terex the Restless here. Now, I could do this with Ancient Shards. I could do it with Void Shards or Primals or whatever I wanted. But generally, for me, 3 years in, and this, I probably started doing this about 16 to 18 months in. It's best to do this with Sacred Shards. So I would say, 5 Sacred Shards plus 200 Mystery Shards would get me a Terex the Restless, and that's all I need. I do not need the Arwid Quivergrass. However, I could go and spend additional Sacred Shards. Now, for me, on my account, I want to show you something. These are the legendaries I currently have on my account. And you can see that I have a lot of legendaries that are not built. Some are duplicates, yes, but there are a lot of very good legendaries who are not built and are not booked. So for instance, Mashalad here, you can see not built, not booked. I have some champions that are built and not booked, so who are 6 stars. For instance, I have Grand Oak Podrig here, who is 6 stars. He's level 55. He's on his way up. Most of his masteries are done, but he's not booked. Right? I have some who have been sitting at 60 for 2 years and aren't booked, like Cupidus here. Right? I got this guy 5 months into my account maybe, and I have never booked him. Legendary tomes are the biggest bottleneck on my account. If you watch my channel, you know that this is true. So there comes a time where getting new champions is less valuable to me than building the champions that I already own. Now, as you can see here, if I go to my legendary tomes, I have 16 skill tomes, which means I can basically build 1, maybe 2 legendary champions with the books that I've got. But I've got probably 10 or 15 that I would like to build. So there was just earlier this week a 1+1 event where I could have pulled shards, Sacred Shards. You can see I have 20. So I could have pulled Sacred Shards and potentially gotten 2 legendary champions. I don't need legendary champions. Right? I don't need legendary champions at this point. Now, there are legendary champions I would really like. I don't have Kaimar. Don't have Duchess. I don't have Kyoku. There are others. So there are still good champions out there that I could get, but my account is very progressed. And the thing that's going to help me out the most is selecting very specific champions that I have in my roster who aren't built and building them out. And that requires books. So if I go back to the Summon Rush, there are 3 legendary tomes here and even a mythical skill tome. Now, in order to go for this mythical skill tome, I would have to pull 14, roughly 13 or 14 Sacred Shards. Now, I have 20. That would allow me to keep 6 moving forward into the next fusion, but it would eliminate the potential that I could ever get a guaranteed champion, right? Because typically that's around 20 Sacreds. So I could pull, say, 5 Sacreds and the 200 Mystery Shards, get my Terex the Restless, complete my Wixwell fusion, not have books for Wixwell, but I would have Wixwell, and then save the remaining 15 shards and hope that there's a guaranteed champion down the road that's really interesting. But again, unless it's Duchess or Kaimar, I probably don't care. Now, this isn't true all the way through. A year in, a year and a half in, 2 years in, two and a half years in, at each point that you progress in your account, you have to make an assessment about whether or not a champion is going to provide more value for you or a resource is going to provide more value for you. Now, you might ask, Colred, why are you going for the fusion champions if legendaries don't really matter? Well, a couple of reasons. One is there's power creep. The current champions that are being released are generally stronger than the champions from 2 years ago. So there's that. It's also something to do. It's something that I enjoy doing in the game, and it's something that I enjoy making content on for my viewers. So I'm doing that as well. I also happen to think this is a very good champion. I think Wixwell is going to be really interesting, and could potentially add something to my account. But you can see that, I also thought the same about Astrid, and I have yet to actually summon her because I don't really have the books for her. I don't have a place. It's not that I couldn't use her. I could absolutely use this champion, but I don't have space in my roster, right? I don't have the books. She's not going to jump in line ahead of some of the other champions I have. As a result, I'm just going to pull her when she brings value to a champion chase, or maybe to a CVC with personal rewards or something like that. So if you are earlier in your account where powerful champions can really move your account, even if they're not booked, right? Because that can be the thing. That was the case for me when I first got Drexthar Blood Twin. You can see he is not booked, but he actually helped move my account when I got him. I got him over 2 years ago, probably 4 or 5 months into the game. So he was very valuable for me. Same thing with Cupidus. He was valuable for me even without books. Now, currently, I don't use them. And I'm glad I saved my books on them and I didn't spend books on them. Would they be better with books? Sure. But I would rather book out my Harima. I would rather book out my Newt. I would rather book out my Artak. So, I'd rather book out my Armands. I had the books to book him immediately because I saved my books for the champions who are really going to provide value. So I need Void legendaries. I need a Yumiko. I need a Krisk. I need a Terrace Marishka. I need those kinds of champions. And I need a Duchess. And I need a Kaimar. And I can wait. I can be patient. Now, if you are impatient and you really, really want champions, if champion collecting is satisfying to you, you should pull during those 1+1 champions. You should pull during those guaranteed champions. You should pull during the 2x events. And maybe, you do the fusions with the minimal number of champions. But if you want to get the most effect out of the champions that are on your roster, you're going to need legendary tomes. You're going to need mythical tomes. And so for me, I am no longer at the point where I care about special shard pulling events. I definitely don't ever care about progressive events, right? The only time I care about a progressive event is like today, when I'm going to be pulling sacred shards for my summon rush for my Wixwell. And that means I'm going to come in here and I'm going to decide which of these champions I want to add into my progressive chance. But I will never pull just for a progressive chance. Even if it's Kaimar, even if it's Duchess, I'm not going to do it anymore. Unless there's another reason to pull. Unless I can get some legendary tomes, or I can win a tournament, or something else is going on. Okay, so what you have to decide is, first of all, what's going to move your account? Is it going to be champions that moves your account? Is it going to be gear that moves your account? Is it going to be optimizing the champions that are currently on your roster that's going to move your account forward? The second thing is you want to think about each shard individually, right? Void shards are your best, only option really for the void legendaries that you want. So be very careful about spending void shards for like events and tournaments that aren't void related, right? Don't throw these away. That means you need to save the sacreds and the ancients for those events. So for instance, during this fusion, I would never pull void shards to complete the fusion unless I absolutely messed up something and I had to. Like, let's say I screwed up and I missed a whole bunch of events and I absolutely knew that I had to complete this summon rush and get the epic, and the only way to do that was to pull voids. That's maybe the only reason I would ever pull a void shard during a fusion. I don't pull them during any turn. I only pull them during 2x events or the guaranteed champion event if you want to go that route. So again, think about each individual shard as a different decision, and you can determine when you pull your shards of each type. So I save sacreds for fusions. I do ancients during fusions as well. And basically I pull ancients anytime there's value. I don't have a specific thing anymore, but I used to really hold them only for 2x events or guaranteed champions. And now they're just like, they're throwaway shards for me at this point because they're just about getting resources, basically. What I'm saying is, when I say throwaway shards, I don't mean they don't have value. I mean, their value is in getting me whatever I need in the moment. I don't need to save up hundreds of these. I don't care about guaranteed champions here. I don't care about 2x events. I just use them as I need them for CVC or for a fusion or for a hero's path or something like that. But all of the other shards get saved very specifically for either 2x events or guaranteed champion events, of which I consider a fusion champion a guaranteed champion. Okay, so that is it. I hope that wasn't too rambling. I'm really curious about your particular method. Which events do you pull your shards for? Where are you in your account's progression? Have you changed your mind, or, are you 2 years in and still pulling based on the same decisions that you made, say, 3 months into the game? Also, if you have any insight into any of the math behind, like, when is the optimal moment to pull a shard, or what is the best moment to invest potentially for spenders in buying a few shards, that can also be useful information you could include in the comments. All right, now I'm actually going to go pull my shards, but we're going to do that in a different video because content. Yeah, so thanks for hanging out. I have been Colred, and I will see you in a shard pulling video very soon.